Yes, hello, good morning. Today is Friday. It's Easter Friday. And I'm just going to post a very short video up on YouTube for the ICC and the Vatican, as well as perhaps the Russian Federation. And I wish to state that I have a right to leave comments against the police and Government of Canada where I have evidence proving that they are Nazis, proving that Parliament Hill are Nazified. And when Canada acts to block my posting a comment against Melissa Landsman, who posted a Passover message, a long comment explaining to this female Zionist MP in the House of Commons here in Ottawa, whom's Zionist Jewish community went against my evidence against the police and Parliament Hill. Masses of evidence. And I took the liberty of cutting Miss Landsman off in my comments against her because the Jewish community here, the Zionists and their NATO allies to Benjamin Netanyahu, have all covered up my evidence against Parliament Hill and their massive Nazi security growth across Canada. And I noted that Miss Landsman in her Passover message got a lot of thumbs up from many, many Jews in the Jewish community. So I wanted to leave comments regarding Miss Landsman's high treason. The Jewish community here has cut a deal with organized criminal gang members, bikers, Italian mafia, a massively growing neo-Nazi skinhead movement in the police here and across Canada, including the RCMP, contrary to Jewish beliefs. That the Jewish community here has decided to protect all of the police Nazi crimes against my wife and I, decided to protect them. In return, the police will go after me with the Jewish Zionists against my evidence, which is all factual and all very well researched, very well coordinated. And I have, as I've said in my videos, that I have a lot of evidence, lots, to prove not just our case against Canada solely, but also enough evidence to prove that NATO states backing Benjamin Netanyahu with his Zionists here in Canada and other countries are recruited by Nazis in the police, in NATO and in the military, and that the Zionists are in deep with them. This explains, and I'm going to say this again, why Miss Landsman and her Jewish colleagues on Parliament Hill all clapped for Hunka, and explains the strange, odd behavior of Miss Landsman and her colleagues not raising a voice in 2 years over this SS Waffen geriatric 95-year-old monster who is a war criminal, who murdered Jewish people and murdered other races of people with his unit in Eastern Europe. This is well documented by the Russian Federation in Moscow. It is documented by the Vatican. It is documented. So I post a comment today explaining what happened at the Russian embassy last summer by these Ukrainian terrorist protesters who violated the law and terrorized and threatened Russian diplomats at gunpoint using a foam pool noodle, to which the police completely supported. And the police, by the way, knew that these Ukrainian protesters in front of the Russian embassy were terrorists. This is not the protesting that we saw at Parliament Hill with the freedom protesters here in Ottawa. They followed the law. They protested. They were very good and never committed any form of terrorist activity. And yet the police went in, the Nazis that they are, with the Trudeau Nazi Reichster, Mr. Prime Minister Trudeau, and beat these people at the freedom protests, threw them to the ground, arrested them, seized their bank accounts, okay? While the police and the government here approve of what is clearly would not be tolerated by these Ukrainian protesters at the Russian embassy had they entertained the same kind of terrorist activity at the freedom protest had they been there, the ones at the Russian embassy I'm talking about. The police came down to the Russian embassy last summer, 2 liaison ones staring at me, taking statements from these Ukrainian protesters. But the Ukrainian protesters couldn't say anything against me with the police because my signs clearly, I was there in defense of the Palestinian people murdered by US, Canada, UK, Zionist Nazi war crimes, okay, by Mr. Netanyahu. And I make this point very clear. Then, so I post the events of what had happened on Miss Landsman's post on YouTube, okay, about the Passover. And everything I said was true. Everything that I stated, I can back up. I have the evidence, okay? And then when I went to post the comment, first of all, they were hacking my iPhone, number one, the keypad, and posting in my words, trying to manipulate the characters into what they were saying was, jail me now. Me. While I was writing this comment, jail him now. Okay, is what they were putting in my comments, okay? This comment. And the other comments I left for her. And then, when I finished, I tried to post this long essay. And the only place I can openly tell people of what Canada's guilty of in their police is either in the comments section of YouTube, or I can send by email, or I can post videos. That's all I can do. So then when I went to post it, this square gray block pops up. It says invalid argument. Oh, my wife and I are very familiar with that one. And I'm going to show you why. Just hold on. This piece of evidence is for the Vatican and for the ICC. Just hold on. My wife and I, in 2012, we were told about the crimes against us in Quebec and our boats in 2012. I was told by the American government to create a journal of everything, times, dates of criminal attacks against us by the RCMP and the SQ together, and these drug dealing marina owners at this Marina La Cire de Champlain Marina in Rigaud, Quebec, as well as the SQ. And this Hell's Angel named Sean Major. Okay, him and his mayor of Lacolle were friends and colleagues of the owners of the marina where my boat was. Sean Major, a Hell's Angel, drug dealing, filthy little pipsqueak, and his mayor, with these drug dealer marina owners, okay, attacked our boat for no reason in their yard. We didn't even know they were drug dealers. We did not know this Sean Major or this mayor of Lacolle. So we gathered evidence, and we got a camera and took pictures. We journaled everything that was happening to our boat. We'd go to our boat in the yard in the daytime, take photos of the damage that was done during the nighttime. We had witnesses who saw it, who told me they were too scared to say anything for the sake of the safety of their wives and children. Okay, that saw them going on my boat, wrecking it. I want to make this clear. Now, when we tried to get the evidence to Transport Canada in Ottawa, okay, when we tried to get the evidence to the Supreme Court of Canada per their request, okay, the police were stealing our evidence. neo-Nazi colonial balls in Security Quebec. Excuse me. Do you understand me? You dirty, filthy, scummy police. And your scummy Nazi bootsuckers on Parliament Hill. Now, here's what happened. The Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, and his Lieutenant Bald Nazi from Quebec, Transport Minister Denis Labelle. Denis Labelle personally signed an order for the seizure of our boat illegally using the International Commercial Shipping Act. And I have the documents here. Now, I will be putting these documents in video on the phone to prove we have evidence. Okay, it's coming, Mr. Carney. It's coming, Mounties. It's coming, Nazi police in Ottawa. Do you understand? You cannot violate the ICC. You understand? Your courts here and your garbage and threats to criminally charge my wife and I consistently for trying to bring our evidence forward is about to end. And it is going to end in asylum, in an embassy. Okay? And that's when you're finished. And I'm looking forward to it because I know that's what's coming. And the least thing you police want here, and you filthy Mounties who did all this, and your NATO buddies, and your pukes on Parliament Hill, your boot-sucking little Nazi boot-suckers, the last thing you want is for me and my wife to get into an embassy. And over this kind of case, I guarantee you it's going to be granted. And that is what I'm working on. Then we get you at the ICC and in the media. Then you pay. Now, here's a document, okay? First of all, we received an order, okay? This particular document, someone felt for us, and who I believe it was a police person who had this document, an order from Mr. Stephen Harper. Okay, this order came directly from Prime Minister Stephen Harper to security in Quebec and the RCMP. Okay, and I'm going to show it to you. I tried to jam it down the throats of NATO states here and the Zionist Jewish community here to no avail. The Russians also have a copy of this document. Okay, they've got it, and I know they do because I gave it to them. But you see, this document was included with the other packages we gave the American embassy twice and the Egyptian embassy. This document was in, I believe, with the evidence we tried to send to the Chinese mission in New York City, to Miss Liu, that Canada blocked. The police blocked us from sending evidence to the Chinese mission in New York City. What we got angry about was the fact that these NATO governments and the Chinese permanent member to the Security Council, when they knew that Canada was blocking our evidence, the Chinese government had an obligation in the UN to call it out. The Canada government was hiding evidence from a couple, okay, deliberately, and blocking them from sending it to us, the Chinese government in New York City. And the same thing with the British government, the exact same thing, and with other governments, okay? They all knew that Canada had a lot to fear from this case. And when they knew that the police here were blocking our letter mail to the Queen, our letter mail to the ICC, our mail by email to the UN and to the Chinese government and so on, when they knew that Canada was doing that, they were supposed to come forward and warn Canada that they're not allowed to do that. We are appealing for an Article 17 at the ICC. I've already made this clear. What is an Article 17? It means that the ICC orders Canada not to block my wife and I's statements any further by any method to the prosecutor's office and the Chief Justice. That's what it means, okay? So this document here, I want to point out that 10 minutes ago, when I was trying to post what happened at the Russian embassy last summer, okay, and what exactly had happened there to Landsman and her followers on YouTube based on her comment regarding the Passover, is when I tried to post, and I'll say it again, when I tried to post this comment about what happened at the Russian embassy, I got a block. I was blocked from posting the comment with a block gray icon that said invalid argument. And I'm going to show you that the Harper government pulled the same thing, and they even used the same statement. And here it is. Let me show you. Here it is right here. I'll just put the phone sideways. You can see this. It says there, okay, it says destroy private data. What does it say there? Invalid argument. This is the document. You can see there, if you look, Harper's order. See it? And here's the document against me and my wife in Lacolle, Quebec. Okay? You can see it right here. Destroy private data. Destroy, and you see the dates over here. Here's the dates of those orders. 2/12/03/19, 2/12/07/13, 2/12/07/13. Note, they did it on the 13th. Okay? You can see what Harper ordered right here very slowly. This is for the ICC and also for the Vatican Embassy. The Russians, I believe, already have a copy of this and copies of everything else. You can see it says started trace for module. Okay, this is Harper giving this order. Invalid argument. The same that they just posted on YouTube. Okay, it's the same. What happens here, and I need the ICC and the Chief Justice of the ICC to understand this. The orders against my wife and I here in Canada, violating our rights to bring evidence forward, is being ordered by the Prime Ministers of Canada. That is who is ordering this. It's them. Okay? Trudeau ordered it. Harper ordered it personally. And Carney is now ordering the same thing. Invalid argument comes from the office of the Prime Minister. Here it is here again against me. And hold on a second. Okay. Error. You see DIF there? Daniel Fitzgerald. That's me. Remove. Remove, it says. Destroy private data. Invalid argument. DIF is me, Daniel Fitzgerald. Okay? That's me. That's Harper ordering a destruction of the journal and file we kept of police crimes against us by both a Hells Angel, the Security Quebec, and the RCMP. Okay? This is what this says. So now I've got it on video. I'll post this on YouTube. The point here is that the gang members in the police, the Hells Angels, the Italian Mafia, have been in the Ottawa Police and the RCMP for decades. Okay? Now we have the neo-Nazi colonial balls in the police, running the police. Okay? All of these, okay, they try to arrest me because I'm trying to bring forward my evidence. They keep doing that. And they keep harassing us covertly, provocatively, through our phones, intimidating us on the streets of Ottawa with their police cars, pulling over, following my wife in 2018-19 in their police cars, parking on streets she's walking up in front of her, and she walks by them, and they're craning their necks at her inside their police cars with faces of hatred, and then they're looking at their databases as some kind of criminal intimidation against my wife. The other thing I'd like you to know, we posted a 4-hour video on my wife's Android, the other new phone. The cost to post a 4-hour video on YouTube of both my wife and I's statements on her phone, on her Jennifer Fitzgerald account on YouTube, cost us 20 gigs of data. 20 gigs. When I post the same videos on my account on iPhone here on YouTube, it costs me about 1 or 2 gigs for every hour and a half. Okay? 20 gigs. They billed my wife's Android 20 gigs. to post the video in her name in her YouTube account. Okay? The one thing the police keep trying to do is they keep trying to separate my wife from me. They keep trying to like, for example, when my wife gave a statement saying to a policeman one day saying, my husband did not threaten this person. I was with him. I'm a witness. He didn't. And this person had no witnesses at all to prove that I did. Okay? I simply told this piece of dog feces, don't ever request oral sex from my wife for a loaf of bread in your food bank ever again, or you're going to have a problem. That I said to him. Okay? That is not criminal. Okay? Not at all. The police keep using criminals on the streets, hackers, to commit crimes against us, to threaten and intimidate us. And it's because it's the police behind it, people need to understand, and the ICC needs to understand. That's why we can't file a police report. Okay, there's a conflict of interest because the gangs and the police, the bikers and the mafia and the police, they control all their little street thugs. They're in with this biker church up the street here. They're in with the motorcycle gangs. Okay, that's why we can't file a complaint. That's why. Anyways, I'll upload this right now. My next video was going to be about our kids and what they did here in Ontario, the gangs, okay? But what I'm going to do is my next video will be documents. I'll take video of all the documents, not all of them. I can't get all of them, but I'm going to get enough documents on the screen of the phone like this one and post it on YouTube for the ICC and the Vatican Embassy. I don't know where the Russians' heads are at here on this, their embassy. I don't know. What I know is that they're on our side. I have no doubt about that. To what extent, though, I'm not sure. What I do know is that because I have enough evidence to have the Canadian federal government on Parliament Hill criminally charged, okay, along with their police, criminally charged, and I'm not kidding, by the ICC. We have enough evidence to have them criminally charged, but further than that, we have enough evidence to have NATO charged as well, okay? Because NATO governments here assisted Canada. The American consulate gave our evidence back to Canada twice. The first time they did it was in 2012 when my wife went in there with the first file. The second one in 2020 had an extra 100 or 200 pages to it because of the crimes committed against us by security and their gangs and their Nazis between 2012 and 2020. So that file is bigger, obviously. But when my wife gave the file to the American Embassy in 2012, she was in there with them, as I said in one of our videos. And I'll say it again, about a month later, we had to return to Quebec after my wife went into the U.S. consulate here in Ottawa because our boat was in Quebec. We had to go back. We came by bus just to do this. And a month later, when I called the American Embassy, I said, what did you do with our file? And they started this routine of, well, it's policy. We have to give any criminal file back to Canada. I said, okay, who'd you give it to? They said the RCMP. I was shocked because the evidence in the file was against the RCMP and the police. Okay, imagine that, eh? And then they asked me on the phone when I told them this, when I asked them what they did with it, they said to me, have you heard from the RCMP? Well, listen, no, we never would, because the evidence contained in the file we gave the U.S. consulate that my wife gave them in 2012 was allegations of criminal acts by the RCMP and threats against my wife and I for trying to bring our evidence forward to begin with, including this document here, okay? So it's really ridiculous for the American consulate. They knew what was in the file. I have no doubt that they looked at it, none whatsoever. In fact, their excuse was just that. Instead, they actually decided that I was onto something big against their ally. And the American consulate and their government elected to protect the crimes by our security and the criminals within multi-jurisdictional police law enforcement in my country. That's what they elected to do. So that's what they did. So I better go. I'm going to post this now. And, okay, and God bless. And I wish people, Jewish people, when I say Jewish people, I'm not talking about the Zionists supporting Netanyahu and his mass Nazi genocide of the Palestinians and his murders and the U.S. dog feces in the White House firing a Tomahawk cruise missile to a school that has 160 children in it. I do not support Mr. Carney's statement about protecting the Jewish community from anti-Semitism, which is caused by his Zionist Jews publicly insulting the Canadian people, agreeing with Netanyahu's genocide and murders of thousands, tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians, and Miss Landsman's statement about Iran, as you see today in her 2-minute post on the Passover, not even a word of compassion for the American Tomahawk missile launched from a U.S. destroyer that killed 160 little Iranian children. Not even a word. Now, do people see what I mean about this Landsman woman? Passover, is she out of her mind? She thinks people that our Jewish God, it's going to support her and her Zionists. She's out of her mind. Let me tell you something, folks. I believe in both the New Testament of Jesus Christ and the Old Testament. Okay? Now, I have a Bible. I also have a Torah. Okay? I have both. But my Bible is 200 years old. It was printed in 1779, my Bible. And it's right here, this Bible here. I'll show it to you. This is my Bible here. See it? Look at this Bible. It's very, very old. And it was printed in 1779. Hold on, I got it the wrong way. I think. Here, maybe it goes this way. 1779, my Bible was printed in 17. This is the only Prince James version of this edition that was printed in 1779. This is the last one on earth. Okay, there's no other original. These pages that you're looking at were printed in 1779 in London. Okay? Okay, now, and this section, the Torah section, is very accurate. Every word in it that's translated from Greek to English is exactly what God said, exactly to the letter. God stated to my people, the Hebrew people, my forefathers of thousands of years ago, he made it very clear to Miss Landsman and her Zionists, filthy Zionist Nazi murderers with no conscience of children, okay? That God made it very, very clear. He said to Moses, if the people follow my laws and statutes and keep to them, he said, I will fight for them against all their enemies if they keep my laws and statutes. That's what God said to Moses. And God said, if they don't stick to my laws and statutes, then I shall turn against them and turn my back on them and allow their enemies to destroy them. That is what God said. Okay? The Zionists have violated every law in the Ten Commandments. Like this Landsman has the nerve to mention the Exodus in her statement today. What nerve she has, okay? Her and her colleagues have violated the commandments of God repeatedly with their American Gentile gods in the White House for decades. They violated the Ten Commandments against our own Jewish people who are not Zionists. They are now violating Christian churches in Israel, this filthy, demonic prime minister that Landsman and her group are supporting here. It just makes me sick. So, they are not honoring the Bible at all. Okay, she's a liar. Okay, nice try, Melissa. Nice try. This is why, and I'll state this now to the Vatican Embassy. I have my menorah right here, okay? I've got another one Here's the one on my scooter, and I'll show it to you. It's been on there for 2 years. Here is my menorah on my scooter, which makes very clear that I'm a person of God. It's a 7-stem menorah, and I wear it because I abide in all his laws. All his commandments I abide in, and I have abided in since they tried to gas me in 2009. Now, he doesn't like me on my phone. I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to open up now with some things before I go. A little bit. I don't want to overwhelm the Vatican and with these other things, or the ICC. But since they tried to gas me in 2009, I survived, and they tried to poison me in jail for threatening Dalton McGuinty, my first offense. I had no criminal record. I was just drunk and intoxicated and upset over the Liberal leader of Ontario and his government not investigating CAS for abusing our little girl, to fill us full of fear, to insult us, to make us angry. They were abusing her and covering those abuses up by the foster parents that they selected while she was in their custody. So that's what happened. And I'm not going to get into that now. We'll wait until I do the videos on the children. So after I came out of jail, my wife and I came here to Ottawa. And in 2010, we bought a boat here in Ottawa, an old Bayliner from across the river on the Quebec side from a marina there for $400. It was just the boat haul. It had no motor or anything. And we were able to live on it on the river because we did not want to live in a home because we were being attacked back then too. Like this case goes all the way back to 2006-07. There's a lot in it. And so what happened was, when we bought this boat, it was coming to winter, and the river, of course, we never saw the Ottawa River ever ice up or anything like that because we've never been on it before. And one night, I got this Bible that I just showed you. My wife got it while I was in jail in Toronto from a lady, a very religious Christian lady that my wife knew at the Women's Center in Toronto, and she was very religious and really sweet. And what she used to do is go around to churches in Toronto, Canada, and she'd go in the back and go into the garbage bins, and she'd grab these old Bibles that the churches were throwing out, and she'd save them and give them to people. That was really nice. So she gave us this Bible. So we had this Bible on the Bayliner. And so what happened was I started praying to God. I became extremely religious on the boat. And I read this Bible so many times. I read different parts of it over and over again. Genesis, Jacob was the light of my life. Jacob. And so I started to have these visions in my sleep. The first vision I had was in the Ottawa River in the boat just prior to winter. And the vision I had is my wife and I were trying to push our Bayliner through the great big ice blocks in the Ottawa River. We were trying to paddle it through the ice. And I remember waking up from that, and I said to my wife, look, I had this dream that, we're going to be surrounded by ice here anytime. It was still, the river had no ice on it. And I said to my wife, look, we got to get the boat on shore somehow, because it's going to ice up. I just had this vision in my sleep. So we paddled the Bayliner, 22-foot boat, paddled it over onto a beach, okay? And I tried to pull it out of the water as much as I could because you're going to live on it for the winter. And 2 weeks later, the river started to ice up. And then I thought, gee, some angel showed me a vision 2 weeks ago, Jennifer. Remember the vision I woke up, this dream I had about ice? Maybe it was, I said to my wife, well, maybe that came from God. Because 2 weeks later, after we got the boat to the other side of the river started icing up. And from then on, it's been visions ever since. Okay? I'm telling you this. One of the reasons why the government's trying to kill us and the police is because of the visions. Okay? The most recent one, the most important one to my wife and I is the one I had 6 months ago. I prayed, I went to sleep. An angel came to me by voice in my sleep after I prayed, and I put my kip in my pocket. And the angel said to me, you and your wife pack up and get as far away from that city as you can. This city, Ottawa. And then, but what happened was, I knew when I woke up that the angel of God told us to leave Ottawa because God's going to destroy this city. That's why. I knew when I woke up. It just became adamantly clear for us to get out because he is going to destroy this city. And I told the whole world. I told the Russians, I told the US government, I told the UN, I told the Jewish community here. I warned them of this. Now, they never got the warning, I did. And so it makes sense to me why the angel of God came to me and told me this in my sleep, because the whole city's been trying to kill us and the Jewish community. And God hates them for that. Hates them. And he's going to bury them here, all of them, and the Jewish community, because they're evil. And that's the bottom line. I tried to warn the Russian Federation government here, and I told them that, they've been pretty kind to us, and they've never given our evidence back to Canada as far as we know. They have allowed us to call them. They've never complained to the police about my wife and I, which is making Carney very angry, I'm sure. They've always welcomed my calls. Now, they're really kind of strange because, sometimes they'll answer the buzzer down there when I go down there with my scooter, and sometimes they don't answer. But it's not because they hate my wife and I. I'm telling you this. They support my wife and I. They gave me a ribbon honoring Russians who fought in Eastern Europe, the Nazis. They gave me a gift. They wanted me to have it. And I just found out actually yesterday. I finally went, I grabbed the ribbon. Here's the ribbon they gave me right here. I'll show you the gift they gave me. This is beautiful. They gave me this ribbon, and I'll show you what else they gave me. The Russian government gave me this stuff. But there's a problem, okay? And I cannot help but be loyal to the Russian government and the Russian people. I can't because, hold on, I'm trying to find it right here. They gave me, let's find it. I can't help but be somewhat loyal to the Russian government. They've been very good. Sometimes I get mad at them, and then they kind of cut me off for a while. I guess, I think overall they realize how serious our case is. And they understand why sometimes I just get mad at them. I can't find it. It's in here somewhere. I put it back in here. I tried to protect these little gifts by separating them, but somehow they got out of the bag, and I just have not cleaned out my drawer here to listen, I trust in God for justice against Canada. I trust in God's wrath, and I trust that he will make the ICC hear our case to help my wife and I any way he can. If there's any godly justice people in the ICC who believe in God, who are against evil, the evil of NATO states, evils against the Russian Federation by NATO states. Okay, it's in here, but I can't find it right now. But they gave me a lapel pin. They were very nice. They gave me a lapel pin. I have their flag on the back of my scooter. Now, the thing here is I'm very sad, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm sad. I'm sad because, I'll tell you why I'm sad. I'm sad because the Russians have been kind to my wife and I as best as they can. I believe that, they would open the gates for us if it was an emergency. I believe in my heart they would do that. And I don't want, when I go there, and then they open up the gate all the time, when I'm there, As a matter of fact, a car came out. I was there the other day. A car came up, and a Russian gentleman came out with his vehicle, and they opened the gate, and I was right there, They know that even though my wife and I desperately need asylum inside an embassy, to be able to have the freedom to have an embassy and its people help us to unload our case publicly against Canada. I respect the Russian government, and I go to their embassy. We're desperate for asylum, my wife and I, inside an embassy, desperate. I don't say anything, but we're desperate. I just don't say anything. Okay, in order to be protected from the police here in the government who are trying to kill us and threaten us and arrest us because of our evidence. This has been the case for a long, long time. And, the Russians, they trust me. They know I respect them. And, when they open their gate, every time they do, and I happen to be there, they're letting a car, and I'm thinking to myself, I wish they would let us in. I don't violate their gate and drive in there with my scooter and them security rushing out. So what are you doing in here? We didn't invite you, or whatever they might say. I will not violate them this way. I'm not going to force the government to grant us asylum. I won't do that. Only under certain conditions will I actually push for asylum, but I will not enter their property unless they open the door to me and my wife. Okay. So, but the problem here is that what happened, I need to explain this to the Vatican. This is for the Vatican and the ICC, for the Chief Justice of the ICC. Please, Vatican, send this video to the ICC. Or what I mean is please contact the ICC's Chief Justice's office. Tell him they need to record my videos, okay? And the process for an Article 17 needs to be started against Canada. That will give my wife and I the opportunity to freely start emailing the ICC the entire case file and everything in it. It's for the betterment of the world, okay, at large, okay? It's not just about my wife and I anymore. It's about peoples who are living under Nazi Western NATO security. And even some of these governments, even like my belief is that even though I can't stand Benjamin Netanyahu, and I do not see any mercy for him at all. I hope his mouth gets sewn up in a casket and buried, because he did a horrible thing that he should not have done, and it did not help the Jewish people at all. It made things worse for us, and I'll explain that in another video. Okay. Oh boy. Oh yes. I was very troubled. See, because years ago, back in 2013-14, the Nazis and the police were ganging up on our boats in Quebec on the river and so on, and pouring water into my fuel tank. The Nazi skinhead balls did that in the SQ. We were sleeping anchored. They poured water in my fuel tank on my boat, Jacob's Goshen. So my wife and I would lose our engine, which is a constant by these police. Is their constant attacks against us always seem to revolve around any kind of motorized transportation that we can escape from them with. Hitler did this to the Jewish people when, in the Nuremberg laws, the Reich stated that Jews were not allowed a bicycle. So essentially the Nazis and the police were attacking our boats' engines with EMP pulsars and putting water in our fuel tanks, depriving us of transportation, the same as Hitler did with his order against Jewish people in Nazi Germany, not allowed to own bicycles. Remember, the law of Germany, of the Nazi Reich, regarding Jews not allowed to own bicycles automatically meant cars or any form of transportation, okay? Airplanes, cars, boats, it was all transportation, not just bicycles. It was every Jew that had a car, the Reich seized it. But anyway, now in 212 or 212, 13, 14, somewhere in there, my wife and I were communicating with the State Department of Hillary Clinton and then John Kerry. He was Secretary of State. So I was calling the State Department hundreds and hundreds of times, reporting crimes and acts and threats by the police in Quebec everywhere we traveled, threats of arrest. They were going into places and stores we regularly frequented, going in with their little notepads, giving me dirty looks. They would go in after we left, soliciting store managers and employees to complain against us. Okay, they were doing this actively. The police here have been doing it actively as well. Okay, same thing. So I was reporting all this. So what happened was, one day, as I regularly did back then, I would call the White House comment line. It was under the Obama administration at that time. And I was calling them regularly. And I was also calling the State Department regularly, almost every day. Sometimes I'd have a calling card at a payphone I'd be calling. the State Department and the White House comment line sometimes 5-10 times a day. My wife and I were scared because we're being followed by organized crime and Nazis in the police, because we had built up the original case file. It was even worse after the file was completed, and when the police found out about the file, about the crimes against us, we turned the file into the police, and we told them, well, I have photos being developed of the attacks against my boat, footprints all around my boat in the boatyard, and someone was attacking our boat and his footprints were all over the place. The other thing they did was this Le Sieur de Champlain Marine in the winter time. Our boat was on blocks. We had a new boat, 31-footer from the United States, that we paid $900 to have brought up on a trailer from Granville, New York. We bought it here in Ottawa in 2009 online. And we hired an American mover there to bring it across the border into Quebec at Rouse's Point, into Lacolle, and bring it to the first marina after the border. So we did. And we brought it to the marina, and it was put on blocks. We had our bay liner that I explained earlier in the video that we bought here in Ottawa. We were living on that. We traveled from Ottawa all the way to Quebec in it in 2010. We bought a Chinese diesel engine from a friend of mine who worked for Shanghai Diesel Engine Corporation as their head sales manager for 30 years, Mr. CZU. He contacted a company over there to sell me this thing called a propeller set, which was essentially a diesel engine with an outboard motor leg on it. We attached it to our bay liner, and we headed for Nova Scotia, but we got to Quebec, ran out of provisions, and then we came up with the idea that, according to the map, our boat was located in New York State, just south of the border with Quebec. So we decided to stay in Quebec and try and get the Trojan that we bought in 2009 here in Ottawa into Quebec. So we'd have a bigger boat, because the bay liner was proving to be kind of small for the journey. So that's how we did it. And as soon as it got into the yard, they started damaging it at nighttime. Every time we went into the yard, it was damaged, footprints around. So we built up this great big case file. Okay, that's what my wife and I did. It was the right thing to do. The police will tell you that if criminals are vandalizing you on a continuous basis, your property, you write up a journal, the times, dates, and so on, what you saw, photographs, okay? And the only people going into that yard in the winter, because there was 2 feet of snow in there, was the owner of the boatyard on the weekends. His name was Charles. He was the only person, because when we went into the yard all winter, while the attacks where the vandalism, damage to our boat was occurring, there was only 2 sets of footprints in the whole yard and 1 set of tire tracks, okay, in that yard. Charles, the owner of the marina, and my wife and I's footprints. That's all that was in that yard. If people were coming to their boats in the yard in the winter when there was heavy snow in there, then you would see multiple tracks. You would see multiple car tires. There was none. The only people coming into that yard during the time our boat was vandalized were 3 sets of footprints. My wife and I's, and Charles. He was the one vandalizing our boat, because there was no one else in there. That's how we proved it. And not only that, but at one point, the city of Lacolle and the marina brought in a John Deere tractor, okay, into the yard to remove the snow, okay? And this tractor was, the guy running the tractor tried to push our boat over. He pushed the bucket up against the bow of the boat, and the boat tilted. The blocks underneath it tilted for the boat to fall over backward, okay? Because when we got to the boat, we saw tractor tire tracks right up at the bow of our boat, and there were damage to the stem of my boat with tractor bucket indentations in the fiberglass, and the boat was leaned over on the blocks. And this was the day after the tractor came into the yard to remove the snow. This is the kind of evidence that we had, okay? All right, so anyway, you know, we were calling the American government, Hillary Clinton in 2007, 8. We were calling John Kerry and Hillary Clinton in 2012, reporting to the White House comment line the damage to our boat. We were calling regularly. The SQ Security Quebec followed us to telephone booths, driving by staring at me. They managed to cut off the value of my calling cards, trying to cut me off from calling the State Department and the White House. There's just lots to this. What the police can do to you and your calling cards, they can reduce their value from $5. You can make 3 or 4 phone calls long distance on one card. That's $5. You can make 3 or 4, then the card's used up. The police hacked into our calling card numbers, and they reduced the value of our card to 1 phone call instead of 3 or 4. They're able to do that back then. That's what they were doing. And like I said, they were following us to every phone booth because we didn't have like a cell phone at the time or anything like that. That's what they were doing. This is part of our report to the ICC. So we were under surveillance and being threatened for disclosing to the White House comment line, to the Obama administration and the State Department, every criminal act, every act by the police in Quebec. I would immediately go to a telephone booth and leave 15-second messages for the Secretary of State's Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, and also calling the White House comment line and leaving messages for the administration. Okay? Now, here's what happened. Like we kept begging the American government to intervene against the Harper government, who was doing all this stuff with the liberals in opposition, okay? And they wouldn't do anything. The Americans wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't say anything. I used to get really mad when I would find out that Barack Obama's inviting Stephen Harper for the Omigo Summit with the President Calderon of Mexico. Just really upset me because I thought, why is this president doing this when his staff are hearing and the CIA are listening in on all the crimes that Stephen Harper ordered against my wife and I, okay? I really get upset. I felt like, what is wrong with that White House? I mean, I'm telling them about, the threats against my wife and I's lives, the constant need to put us in orange jumpsuits into jails where we can be murdered by the Nazi and gangster guards that are in charge of their corrections, which they won't show you. They won't tell the ICC about that. Canada's government doesn't want to tell the ICC about all the gangsters that they've hired wearing guards uniforms in our detention centers who tried to murder me with their gangster inmates. Okay? Like, this is another problem. The lack of truth and dishonesty by Canada's justice minister, okay, about the kinds of low-life criminal scum, gangsters in uniforms in our detention centers, okay? And they're using these to murder me, you see? That's what's going on. So I don't want to get off track here, but so I'll get to the point. In around 2013-14, I called the White House. Left a comment for the Obama administration, and I called the State Department that same day. So then that night, we were on our boat, or maybe we weren't. I don't remember exactly where we were, but I think it was 2000. I believe it was 2012 when this happened, actually, because we had Jacob's Goshen in 2014. My mom bought it for us in Quebec. She put money in our account, and I found the boat advertised on Kijiji or something like that. And the other boat, the Trojan 31, we had from 2011 to November 13, 2012. And in between the two, we had a 16-foot wooden runabout and a canoe in between those two boats, okay? So when I called, after years of calling the White House and the State Department, reporting every crime, every action by the police here that was illegal, trying to kill us, the unlawful detention in a psychiatric ward in St. Jean-sur-Richelieu for the purpose of a cover-up, like that in itself has to go to the ICC, what happened in that hospital. And I have to give testimony on that as well. And I haven't yet, but I will. What happened was that one night after I called, or the day before, I called the White House and comment line, as I usually do. And then not that same day and night, but the night after, I prayed and I went to sleep. And first of all, an angel of God came to me in my sleep, and the angel said to me by voice, I don't like the police. I knew it was God right away. And then the angel told me, he said, then it wasn't an angel, it was God actually that told me this. I know his voice. Yes, I do. I've been blessed with knowing his voice. His is different than Jesus' voice. The two voices are different. And so the angel said to me in my sleep, do not contact the Amorites again, because I am going to destroy them. That came from God. He was talking about the Americans, because he watched me calling and calling. God was watching us, and I was praying on the boat and to him and praying, and the visions kept coming, and he said, don't contact. He refers to the Americans as the Amorites. Don't ask me why, but that's what he said to me. He told me not to contact them again. He was going to destroy them. Okay. Now, I guess I went against him on that. It wasn't that I went against him. It was that I wanted to tell the Americans what God told me, and I called the White House and I tried to tell the comment line operator and the American administration that God told me he's going to destroy you in my sleep, not to contact you again. And I used that to try and get the American President Obama to believe, okay, that God told me this, and for him to take steps to take corrective measures on my wife and I's part against Canada, okay? And also to encourage the American people. I called there twice after that, and the American comment line operator at the White House said to me, what is it you wish to say to the President, Obama? And on 2 occasions when I called, and they asked me this question, I stated to them, I said, I want the American president to please install the 10 commandments into the American people and have them honor them. I begged, because of the other visions I had. So, of global destruction by God. Yeah, he showed me what he's going to do to the planet, and Canada and the United States in particular. Every vision I had of destructive heavenly natural acts against the US and Canada to destroy our countries and people were all asteroids and so on. These were very scary, and they woke me up. And sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and I'd make phone calls half asleep after I had these horrific visions of asteroids and rocks smashing into Canada and Ottawa here as well. I was very scared, and so I tried to give out warnings. They ignored them. All right, so here's what happened. As I say, since about 2017-18, my wife and I have consistently ran to the Russian embassy. We threw lots of documentation in envelopes over their fence at their embassy with their permission, that of Ambassador Darshiev at that time and his diplomatic team, and then Ambassador Stepanov took over, I guess, was appointed by President Putin, and they gave me permission actually last year. They said that documents I'm allowed to give them. I tried to offer them a gift in return last year for their kindness. They gave me these gifts here. I didn't know what this ribbon meant till last night. I finally went on and checked. I should have done it a long time ago. It was an honor to receive it, because this ribbon represents all the Russian Red Army soldiers who gave up their lives on the Eastern Front to kill Hitler. That's very important to me, and I love this ribbon, and I should really frame it for the honor of the Russian people that lost their lives fighting Hitler. And I'm very sorry to the embassy. I did not know what it meant. I don't know. They gave it to me in a little bag. They didn't tell me. The diplomat, he was very kind. He didn't tell me what this ribbon meant. I have another one, but it's a copy of the Russian flag, but it's a ribbon like this one. But anyway, in spite of that, I was quite shocked, because about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe a little longer, I prayed and I went to sleep, and an angel came to me and simply said to me, there'll be no mercy for Russia and China. And I woke up and I was just, I wouldn't say shocked, but I was very upset about this, because I like the Russian embassy, but obviously God knows better, and they must be doing something that he's against. Now, the only thing I tried to figure out why the angel told me there would be no mercy for Russia and China, neither nor the United States, what the angel told me back then, know that they're the Amorites and not to contact them again. Well, it became obvious to me then that God told me this because the Americans would not do anything to stop Canada's crimes against us, my wife and I. And frankly, when the angel came to me in my sleep months ago and told me no mercy for Russia and China, well, the Chinese government here on Patrick Street, their embassy, I contacted them and they were willing to accept our evidence if I brought it down to their embassy on Patrick Street. And they agreed. They said they were willing to. They would ask me if I wanted to come in the embassy, and I said, well, no, I don't really have the appropriate dress required. I don't have a suit or anything like that. I didn't feel comfortable. If I wanted to go in there, I'd want to present myself accordingly, in a nice suit and tie. I don't have that and couldn't afford it anyway. So I didn't feel comfortable with that invitation. So I said thank you, but no. Because they weren't offering me to come in their embassy for asylum. They were offering me to come into their embassy and talk to them and give them the file and then leave. And I just didn't feel comfortable in doing that. Had the Chinese embassy said here, well, if your evidence turns out to be accurate and good, we might be able to assist you and your wife somehow. But they never actually said that. But anyway, they told me to bring it down. They asked, they said, okay, bring it down, the diplomat said. And he asked me when I was coming. So I said I could come in a few days. So initially, I didn't give them the entire evidence package. I just gave them some of the most serious stuff as samples, because it's so much work to get an entire file together. There's hundreds of pages which have to be organized by my wife. And they were in disorganized condition because we had quickly packed them away and lost the organization of the documents. Now, my wife has more recently went through all the documents and put them in order, thank God for her. But at the time, I took down the most serious stuff that we had in a package. I had a card in there for Ambassador Kong, who is the Chinese representative to Canada, thanking him and his embassy for receiving us and our evidence. And I had another card in there for President Xi Jinping, thanking him as well, and thanking the Chinese Communist government for being willing to have a look. So I took the package down. I went in a cab. I took a taxi down there in the winter time a couple seasons ago. And I went to the gate and buzzed. And then this security man came out with a red cap on, a young man in his 20s, with a senior official staring at him as he came at me at the gate on his side of the embassy. A man standing on the steps, some senior official, older, in his 50s or 60s with gray hair. And he came to the gate and he said, we can't accept this, she said. I said, well, I talked to your diplomat on the phone. He told me it was okay for me to bring it down and give it to you. And he kept saying, well, no, we can't. So then I went home. I caught the taxi back home here. We don't live too far away from the embassy, maybe a couple of kilometers, if that. And I called the embassy and I spoke to the gentleman who told me to come down with it. And I said, well, I was just there, and your security came out and said, no, they can't accept it at the door, at the gate. And he said, when did you come down? I said, 10 minutes ago. And he said, well, when would you be willing to come back down? And I said, well, in a couple of days or so. I'll try again, I said, but make sure, please, that you tell them I'm coming so they know that, So the next time around, I rode my bicycle down there. It was snowing out. I didn't have any money for a cab. I had the package. I go down there. There's this goon standing on the sidewalk, and I can't figure this out. I never said nothing to him. I talked to him briefly. I asked him why he was there, why he was standing in front. That's what I was asking him. I didn't say to him why I was there at all. I never told him nothing. And he just outrightly said to me, I've been asking the Chinese government here for 30 years for help against Canada, and they've always said no. I said, oh, well, why was he saying that to me for? He didn't know I was there for that reason, unless it was a setup and he was sent there, which is exactly what happened. So I had the package. Excuse me. And I buzzed the buzzer on their gate. And instead of the security official coming out, it was another gentleman. I believe it was the one I spoke with on the phone. And he came up to the gate, to the door. And I said, here's the package. I said that that you asked for, that I want to give you of our evidence, some of it. And I said, in the top here, there's a card for Ambassador Kong thanking China kindly and your embassy for accepting our material. And also a card for President Xi Jinping. I don't know if you can get it to him or not, or whether he accepts cards. But I said, here it is. So what he did was, this Chinese diplomat looked over my shoulder at the guy standing behind me on the sidewalk, and he immediately got scared. Now, I could not see if the guy on the sidewalk gave him some kind of threatening, dirty look. I couldn't see behind me. But clearly, when he looked over my shoulder, whatever this guy's face looked like, the diplomat immediately became very uncomfortable. And he said to me, look, would you mind putting it in our newspaper box just down the street here, and I'll come get it later, because something happened with this. This guy behind me must have given him a dirty look, but I couldn't see it. Now, the newspaper box he was talking about, when you drive down to the Chinese embassy and you come to their fence, which is very long, I mean, it's probably 2 blocks long, about, I don't know, 100 feet from the entry door into the embassy, they have a newspaper box on the outside on Canadian soil. And it's a Chinese newspaper box so that they can get Ottawa's Chinese newspapers in Chinese that are printed here. Okay. So that's where he wanted me to put it. And I did. But the problem for me was, as I walked away, that newspaper box is completely open. It's not like I had to stick a quarter in it to open it, right? To get a paper. It was a free newspaper box, which means that anybody could go in there and take my package. And I didn't really like that. I could have said, I remember regretting doing that after I left on my bicycle, thinking I should have actually told him I would come back, that I'm not prepared to leave this kind of material in his newspaper box where that guy on the sidewalk could just walk up, go in, take it, and leave. Okay? But I didn't do that. I just assumed that he felt comfortable. So after that, about a week or two later, I called the Chinese embassy in the evening. I left some messages for different departments, thanking them and asking them, what are you going to do with it? Did you get it? Like, I was asking them, did you get the material out of the box? And I wasn't getting an answer. So I called one day during the daytime, and the same guy answered the phone, this Chinese diplomat. And it was the same guy who told me to bring it down. He said to me, don't call here again. Don't call this number again. He said to me, excuse me, I made an error there. He said, is this Daniel? I said, yes. He said, don't call this number again. He hung up. So then months later, after winter ended, that was around when I called, it would have been around January or something like that, 2 winters ago. And then in around April, May, I had my scooter. I bought my scooter. So I drove my scooter down there when the snow was all gone and had warmed up substantially. And I buzzed the Chinese embassy when I got there, and I said, this is Daniel Fitzgerald. I'm coming by my scooter. I just wanted to know, what did you do with the material? Did you get it? Did you give it away? Like, could you please tell me? And it was very polite. And the voice at the other end, he says to me, get off our property or we'll call the police. I was shocked. I was shell-shocked. And I was so shocked, like when I left on my scooter, I almost drove into a telephone pole. I was literally in shock. And I was really upset, and I was shocked. I couldn't believe what he said to me. So I took my scooter right away. I drove it up to the Russian embassy, which isn't too far away, and I buzzed them, and I said to their security official, I said, do you know what the Chinese consulate just did? I said to the Russian government, I said, I went there just asking about the material I gave them. I said to the Russian government, very polite and cordial with the Chinese consulate, their buzzer. And I said, they told me to get off the property, to call the police. And I said to the Russian security official and the buzzer at their embassy, do you know anything about this? So now that's what happened there. And again, this is for the ICC, and I'll notify the Vatican embassy of this video, like I have the rest, by email and by telephone call. The only way that my wife and I can give statements to the International Criminal Court in The Hague and the Chief Justice and perhaps the prosecutor is by them accessing my videos on YouTube, as well as the 4-hour one that's on my wife's account on YouTube. Okay. So in context, in regard to me having this vision, 6 months ago or something, where the angel, where after I prayed, this voice came to me in my sleep telling me there's going to be no mercy for Russia and China. The reason for that, the primary reason, is the same reason, because God was watching me, asking them for help, giving them criminal evidence against Parliament Hill and their security, and they didn't do anything. And in both cases, unfortunately and sadly, as far as the Russian government goes, is that since 2017, when we first approached the Russian embassy and the Darshiev diplomatic team, because they ignored taking any real action against Canada over the case, many crimes and threats against us have been acted upon us by this city and the police, okay, and the gangs on the streets here. Many crimes have been committed against us here, and I totally believe that's the reason why the angel came to me and said there'll be no mercy for Russia and China neither, because they're doing the same thing that the American government did. And the angel came to me then, after I had appealed to the American government. The exact same thing happened then. I prayed, went to sleep, the angel comes to me. It was actually God in that one telling me, don't contact the Emirates again, I'm going to destroy them, right? Because they all three superpowers keep allowing Canada to keep committing these crimes, and whether intentional or unintentional, for the Russians, with the Russians, I don't believe it's actually intentional, but I'm just saying that these countries' policy, okay, Russia and China and the U.S. and NATO's, is not in accordance with international criminal law, okay, that they keep mentioning over and over again in the UN Security Council. Our case is a case where what is happening to us here in Canada is because of all this evidence we have. The police keep threatening to arrest us and kill us, and because that's how they do it in Canada. People need to understand the gang structure here. Okay, there's two ways they kill you. The gangs either kill you on the streets, okay, or the gangs go to their members in the police and their friends in the courthouses and Parliament Hill here, and they arrest you and they put you in detention and you're dead. They'll kill you there. Okay, that's what Canada's doing. And this is so important to get this to the ICC, this information, okay? Canada's mafia empire, government police, they're not going to be able to threaten the ICC, okay? They can try, but the bottom line is, if this goes public, okay, our case, and Canada's condemned for this is a very, very extremely serious destruction, a permanent destruction to Canada's government, its security and judicial system. Because what Canada's done to my wife and I also falls under international terrorism. Because the Parliament Hill here, the police, their courts, and their street thugs, these are terrorist acts against my wife and I as well. And they do fall under international law. I have already looked at the Rome Statutes, Articles 6, 7, and 8. I've looked at these on Google. I didn't write them down or anything, or the ones that apply. It's just necessary for me to know that they have violated the Rome Statutes in our case, and therefore the ICC has to see it that way as well. I don't need to write down what the prosecutor and the Chief Justice at the ICC already know. They already know what the Rome Statutes say. The other thing I wish to state is that this idea that you cannot appeal to the ICC for Nazi war crimes. These days, the very idea that you cannot, but you can only on the principle that there's been thousands of one race of people murdered or incarcerated with human rights violations and murders and tortures, that only a large number or group of one race of people and witnesses to those events can appeal to the ICC. That's not true. You can actually appeal as an individual. How do I know? Well, the Dutch government in New York City. I mean, we came to them. They told us, based on our allegations, our case had to be investigated by the ICC. Okay, based on the contents. It was about my wife and I, the allegations. I didn't include NATO yet, and what the American government, their NATO buddies here, the British, what the American government was doing in Washington when I called the British embassy in Washington or the UN in New York City, right? So what it means is that individual cases are allowed to go to the ICC, okay? In spite of Khan and making up these ridiculous statements that he seems to present, not in any way officially, but the prosecutor, Mr. Khan at the ICC, seems to promote the idea that the ICC only looks at cases involving thousands of people who are victims of human rights and war crimes violations and the governments that commit these. That's not the case. Our case is very serious, and as we have enough evidence in our case to have Canada prosecuted criminally, and those involved warrants for their arrest. In our case, looking at it in comparison to a case where it's thousands of people, and the ICC goes after the government like they've done with the Palestinians. The only real difference is between our case and the Palestinians, for example, is that our case, we have hundreds of charges against Canada, okay, that range from Nazi terrorism, Nazi war crimes, to outright terrorist acts against us by the government and security and the courts. This is a Nazi police state, which we can prove. There's just numerous charges against Canada. Whereas in the case of the Palestinians, it may be fall under 2 or 3 different categories of human rights genocide, okay? But in our case, instead of having thousands of people in our case, what I'm saying is, instead of having thousands of Canadians, we had thousands, of criminal charges is the best way to kind of describe that. And also, in our case, the other reason why I'm going to push this is because the policy that Canada used against us, I pointed this out to the Russians, the policy that Canada has used, and I'll say it again, the political policy by Canada's government security against my wife and I matches precisely the policy behind the genocide of the Palestinians and the policy of the Nazism in the Ukraine, and acts. What I'm saying here is the policy used against us is a general NATO Nazi policy that they apply to other countries and peoples in much larger numbers. It's the same policy. What do I mean by this? Well, we can prove it to the ICC. The Russian Federation diplomats like Ambassador Vasily Nesbezhny and Sergei Lavrov and Vladimir Putin, for example, and even Dmitry Medvedev. These high-end officials of the Russian government have consistently come forward with evidence to the Security Council, either defending themselves or defending their actions, or proving that allegations against the Russian Federation by NATO state leaders and their governments is a lie. The Russians have brought lots of evidence to the Permanent Council. They brought evidence about the Palestinians to the Council. Everything that they brought to the Council, these are evidential documents. But yet, here's the point, is NATO is refusing their evidence and still trying to convict them. Now, this policy is the exact same one that Canada's government security have been applying against us. We have all the evidence, and they're turning around, criminalizing us, and refuse to accept our evidence. So this is where I can prove to the ICC that Canada's policy against my wife and I, no matter how much evidence we have against Canada, or the police, or the courts, or the gangs, or the Nazis, or whatever the case may be, that no matter how much evidence we have no evidence at all, and we're the criminals, which is exactly the position of the United States government, the UK, Canada, and its NATO allies against any absolute proof by weight of material evidence by the Russian government, bringing that evidence in and providing it to member states of the Security Council. So there you go. And I got to go. I'll post this video now, and God bless. I wish all people a safe Easter. God bless Jesus Christ in his memory. He's big with me. And I wish all of the Jewish people, except the Zionists, a very safe Sabbath, as well for myself, because I celebrate the Sabbath. It's nice for me because there's Easter and the Sabbath, so I have a reason to light my candle of Jesus right there. And that was a gift to Father Jim at the Vatican, this candle. My wife bought it for him with a card for his kindness to us and understanding and believing us as well. But he told us to keep it and pray for him, which we're going to do. Oh, go ahead. My wife wants to say something.
Just wanted to say one thing on this Good Friday. It's an Easter message. And what I was thinking of, what came to mind, is how happy the disciples must have been when Jesus rose from the dead. Their dear friend appeared before them after they saw his suffering on the cross, and he appeared before them. And I can feel the same way, empathize with them, because my husband and I would like nothing better than for him to appear now for us.
Yes.
And for
absolutely.
And before the world to return. It would be one of the most amazing things for us to see his hair as white as gold, his feet with bronze, the fire in his eyes.
Yeah, and his hair on
Our
fire. And his hair on fire,
No.
glowing orange on fire.
Our dear friend coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly. Praise Jesus, come back. Jesus, God, and punish this government and their satanic evil police.
Some people.
And NATO for all they've done to my wife and I. Pray to the Lord. Amen.
Some people he will say, I don't know you. But he's going to say to Daniel and I know you too very well.
He already has said that many times in our sleep, Jed.
And then for maybe the first time, we'll have a faithful ally, because there just doesn't seem to be anyone.
And finally, before I post this video, I want to state something else. There is a what appears to be a Vatican Catholic mother who posts a little video on YouTube. I listened to her last night about her condemnation of Benjamin Netanyahu, and I know why she's doing that. He's now attacking Jesus Christ. He's attacking the Christian churches, and of course, Carney's following suit. So we have this Zionist monster in Israel, this prime minister, who's now going out to attack Christians openly. He's attacked Jesus already, is my understanding. He's actually stated that, something against Jesus. And then we have the Carney Zionist on Parliament Hill here, supporting Zionist community and Zionist politicians on Parliament Hill, who not once even said they felt bad for the American Tomahawk missile that killed 160 little children in Iran. Nor have any of these Zionist politicians here, the Zionists in the community here. I'm not talking about all Jews. I isolate the killers and the murderers, or those that support genocide, the groups in the Jewish community. I'm not all Jewish people. We have lots of wonderful Jewish people here. You know, we have some very open-minded Jewish people here in Canada. I have a very open-minded, at least it seems that way, Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. They know what I know. Okay, we know the cause of hatred towards Jews. Okay, let me tell you that right now. I'm very aware of this. Simon Wiesenthal Center and myself, we know the true culprits. This Melissa Landsman garbage about the growth of anti-Semitism. She's lying. She uses this construct, okay, of Iran. You notice how it's Iran. It's Iran. Miss Landsman is a liar, for one thing. I'm an expert. She does not have my qualifications, period. It doesn't even come close. My qualifications and my position is the same as the position at Simon Wiesenthal International in Los Angeles. The problem simply is that Simon Wiesenthal International already knew who's behind the massive anti-Semitic drive to murder Jews all over again. Okay? It is not Iran. Okay? It is not the Palestinians. Okay? I can assure you of this. This is not the case, because Simon Wiesenthal Center basically When I called them, I couldn't figure out. I was leaving hundreds of messages 6 years ago for Rabbi Marvin Heyer at that time, prior to his retirement, and the center in voice messages explaining to them our case. Okay. And I was rather shocked when, I just wasn't getting any response. And the stuff I was telling them is what I've been saying in my videos to the ICC. And I began to think they didn't care, but that wasn't the problem. But they didn't bother to tell me their thinking, This is the one thing about, my Jewish brothers and sisters is they're very humble. They don't talk a lot. They talk amongst themselves, you see. And that's a problem because there can be misunderstandings between myself and them with the center. And there was. Because what had ultimately happened was the reason why they were not really responding with shock about the things that I was telling them about neo-Nazism growing in NATO security all over the United States. They weren't in shock because they were already monitoring it. Okay? They were already monitoring the Nazi balls growing in American law enforcement, federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, and so on. They were already doing what I had done. I think the shock to them was, how does he know about this? We've kept this secret. Well, they have been keeping it secret. See, that's the whole point. They have been keeping it a secret. The Jewish communities already know about the Nazi balls in the police. They know who they are, what they are. They're Nazi SS, and they know that. Okay? But the problem is I didn't know they knew. Do you understand? And the other part of the problem is some of them are so fearful of even addressing my evidence of Nazi balls in the police. Some are just simply so frightened that they get angry and scared and want to run from me. That's part of it. It's a mixture of a number of different emotions by different Jewish people in the Jewish community over my asking them to receive my evidence. Okay. They know that by receiving my evidence, they know the police are following us everywhere, the Nazis and the police, the balls, and they're the ones running the show against my wife and I. This is a huge, huge collective within NATO security. And I'll tell the ICC, I've got photographs, Mr. Chief Justice, of these Nazi skinhead balls. I've got them in Scotland Yard. I've got them inside Buckingham Palace's security for the royal family, which might explain Charles' lack of coming forward about Canada, for example, or the removal of Starmer. I've got them in the London police. I've got them at the Ecuadorian consulate in uniforms, skinhead balls. I've got them investigating the Skripal case, 2 of them, Nazi skinhead balls. I've got them at British citizens' protests, one of them going up to a British lady who is retired, about 70 years old, as a matter of fact, an elderly lady, ordering her to remove her signs. Okay, a Nazi bald in a British police uniform, and her saying, "No, I'm not removing my signs." And he told her again, and she said, "No, my signs are legal," and he threw her to the ground. Okay, I've got Nazi balds on U.S. aircraft carriers as admirals. Photographs, Nazi balds. I've got Nazi balds landing in German U.S. air bases in U.S. military cargo jets as co-pilots, Nazi skinhead, pale white, tall balds. I've got them here in Canada all over the place. I've got a number of them in the U.S. I got, one Nazi bald jumping out of a police car in Virginia late one night. He was at a stop sign. He jumps out, runs up to this man in a wheelchair and starts beating the crap out of him. That's on video. Okay, Nazi bald. I've got the Nazi bald from the RCMP who threatened me at a motel room, telling me my power tools were weapons, trying to throw fear into me because he didn't want me pushing my complaint any further, okay? Because the balds tried to gas me in a jail in Toronto, these guard balds, okay? And playing German polka music and trying to gas me with a barbecue above my cell. I've got these balds everywhere. When my wife and I lived in Crystal Beach, Ontario, at my mom's house in 2017-18, we're walking to the bank, okay, ICC. 2 Niagara police cars followed us to the bank on foot. We were on foot. 2 pale white balls, Mr. Chief Justice, in police cars in the Niagara Falls, Ontario Police Department, staring at us with cold stares as they drove by us. They knew exactly who my wife and I were. In other words, all of these balls in this U.S. NATO collective police security. Mr. Chief Justice, all have my wife and I's photographs. This is a collective of Nazi skinheads in security throughout NATO with my wife and I's photographs, and we're on their target list. The proof is in the pudding. So that's a part of my proof. I've got the timelines for these balls over decades, Mr. Chief Justice. The timeline. Why is a timeline important? Well, we look at right now, today, at the diplomatic atmosphere around the globe between NATO and the Middle East, Russia, China, and so on. Now, from 1945, even though Russia was the former communist Soviet Union with the Warsaw Pact, from the end of World War II right up to when Gorbachev tore down the wall with Ronald Reagan, okay? Even throughout those years when it was the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe against NATO, there was a peace there. There was a peace between the West and the Soviet bloc, which was maintained through the ideals of mutually assured destruction, okay? When Gorbachev tore down the walls with Ronald Reagan and Russia became some form of democracy, okay? Russia started doing business with the West and, building Western enterprise in Russia, fast food, McDonald's. And so I'm sorry, I'm just blazing over this very quickly because I got to upload the video. Now, all throughout American administrations from 1945 right up until the Bush administration, I would say, or maybe around just after the Clinton administration, somewhere in between the Clinton administration, the Obama, and the Bush administration, excuse me, I started noticing, because I did the research, I looked exclusively at hours of video on the Nixon administration in the White House, the media in the White House, news cameras, the U.S. Congress, security in Washington. I started researching the security of the White House in Washington, the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. Congress. I started researching from the Kennedy administration, the Lyndon B. Johnson administration, the Richard Milhouse Nixon administration, the Ford administration, the Carter administration, the Reagan administration, and the Bush Senior administration, okay? Then the Clinton administration, okay? Now, all through these administrations, I could not find one FBI pale white tall skinhead bald in all of those administrations. I could not find one bald in the CIA in the White House. From all the views I had of news reel tapes of the years of these administrations in the White House, I could not find one skinhead bald, okay? And I noted that the lack of them, and also in NATO, there was none. Margaret Thatcher and the former Prime Minister of the UK, Tony Blair, there was no London skinhead balls in the London police. There was none in MI6, okay? There was none in the British military. There was none in the American military. As a matter of fact, when Norman Schwarzkopf, the former general of the U.S., and Colin Powell were commanding the invasion of Iraq, again, I could only see very few balls in security in Washington. And that includes the American police. That includes the UK and Europe. Okay, and what I noted was that after Obama came into power, from his time forward, these skinhead Nazi balls start appearing everywhere in NATO security and the military. And I noted that from 2008 to now, 2026, that as these balls, skinheads, grew in NATO security, the military, and in police security of the RCMP, the CIA, FBI, state police, in Canada, the U.S., the U.K., Europe as well. Okay, as they built up, I noticed that NATO's relationship with Russia was drastically going downhill. The same with China. And also, I wish to report that in 6 years ago, when I was in contact with Simon Wiesenthal Center actively, and with the center, Rabbi Marvin Heyer, and so on, that during that time period, there was a report that came out by, now get this, by the Israeli embassy in Washington and their Israeli mission in New York City to the UN. This was back then. This is prior to Gaza, prior to Iran, okay? Prior to all of that, okay? And the report was, and I got this through Rabbi Marvin Heyer at Simon Wiesenthal Center, okay? There was a report by the Israeli embassy that went public, okay, back then. And they stated that they had collected over 100,000 visas from American Jews in the United States requesting applications and visas to go back to Israel. They stated that they had not seen such a large number of Jewish American applicants for visas to go back to Israel since Hitler. Okay? Since Adolf Hitler. So now, in contrast to that, that is when it actually started. When the anti-Semitism against Jewish people in the United States, Canada, the UK, and NATO states actually increased. I listened to victim complaints of Jewish people in the United States in their regular everyday lives, and the anti-Semitic attacks during my contacts with Simon Wiesenthal Center. For example, and I addressed this to the Vatican and the ICC. During my term as contact with Simon Wiesenthal Center in Beverly Hills in Los Angeles, there was a story that broke out all over YouTube, and because I was monitoring for anti-Semitic attacks against my Jewish brothers and sisters, and a story came out of a rabbi who invited his rabbi colleagues with their Torahs to his home on a Sabbath Saturday to do their thing with the Sabbath and the Torah for the Sabbath, okay, to do their prayers and so on. And in that, some dark-skinned African person, I think of African descent, I can't be sure about that, went into that house with a machete and started slicing up the rabbis. This was mass media, okay? As soon as I found out about that story, I called Simon Wiesenthal Center right away. As soon as that story appeared on my phone, and I directed a message to Rabbi Marvin Heyer, and I said, Rabbi Heyer, I just saw the story on YouTube. Have you seen it? About the rabbis attacked in his home with his colleagues on the Sabbath by a man with a machete. And I said to him, that was a Nazi attack. That man was recruited by the Nazis. That's a Nazi. He's a Nazi. That's what I told Rabbi Marvin Heyer. Okay? and of course, I prayed, and my heart went out to the victims, because I'm related to them by blood, and they're wonderful people for the most part, except for the Zionists who want to play into the Nazi problem as opposed to go public and reject it politically. Here in Ottawa, Melissa Landsman is useless. I would be better off in her position in the House of Commons, because I'll just come out and say to Carney right there and then, your police are Nazis, pal, and these bills are Nazi bills. You're C9. That's what I would say to him. If I was head of the Conservative Party, believe me, that is what I would be saying in the House of Commons to Mr. Carney, that he's a Nazi, and I would even tell him, I'm going to go see the king myself and have you removed, okay? And your security Nazi chieftains pushing for pro-Nazi Hitler SS laws against innocent people in Canada. But anyway, after I had made that call, okay, letting Rabbi Marvin Heyer know that I had listened to it on TV, the attack against these rabbis in this rabbi's home on the Sabbath with a machete by this man. A week later, it was in the media that they had captured the man who did this. The New York City police got a warrant to search his apartment. And it was in the media. They went in there, searched his apartment, and you know what they found? Nazi paraphernalia. Okay? Boy, was I right. The ICC needs to understand about the new Nazis now. If you want to learn something, Mr. Khan and your colleagues. The new Nazis have made several changes to their operations. Okay, they've also made changes to their racial hatred. Because what's happened is the Nazi skinhead balls in security, they are recruiting all races of people into the Nazi fold. They're recruiting Jews into the Nazi fold to work for them. They're recruiting African-skinned people. They're recruiting some Middle Eastern people into the Nazi fold, okay? This is what they're doing. So what's happened is the Nazis are hiding in our security apparatus throughout NATO as security officials, okay? And they are recruiting all kinds of races of people to commit Nazi-type anti-Semitic crimes against Jews and other races of people they don't like, okay? As far as the upper echelon of the head Nazi balls, they're recruiting the street people and different races to attack Jews and other races of people. They are operating at that level also to apply anti-Semitic Nazi policies against Russia through their support of the Ukrainian leader. All right? Do you understand this? Does the ICC kind of understand what I'm getting at here? So I'm just, I'm giving the ICC through the Vatican Embassy an opportunity to set the record straight. The problem here is what I'm seeing here is that the prosecutor of the ICC is not, maybe not pro anti-Nazi. Okay, the Russians have said it already a million times. I agree with them that the policies against them, the policies of Zelensky, is running his security Nazi style. They're threatening any reporter that tells the actual truth as opposed to the Zelensky NATO narrative. We've seen this witnessed by reporters in the Ukraine, something that I think that Mr. Khan was not being fair about. Okay, in his investigation in the Ukraine, it seems that Mr. Khan's investigation was one-sided for Zelensky, as opposed to any evidence that the Russians had or actual physical media reports on camera of Western reporters going into the Ukraine and getting so fed up with having to lie and give a different narrative on camera for the sake of their government's narrative to be carried by broadcasters in NATO countries, that these reporters got fed up with it and they finally broke down and said, we can't do this anymore. We're not going to lie for NATO government states that we come from so that their narrative, our narrative, fits their narrative on the news in our countries to the people. These reporters finally said, no, we're not prepared to do that anymore. It's sickening. The Ukrainian army's murdering their own people, and we know this. And a few of them came out, okay, and said this live on camera. They were on YouTube, and they haven't been seen ever again. I wonder if they're dead. Okay, see, so this is why, I ask that that my statements and videos go directly to the Chief Justice of the ICC. Okay, because I don't trust Mr. Khan. I'm sorry. I find that, he's bigoted against Russian evidence. He's bigoted against any evidence against NATO, by his one-sided investigation on behalf of the Ukraine government that NATO is supporting. A prosecutor is supposed to be fair across the board. I understand that Mr. Khan has asked the Russians to respond, but Mr. Khan decided to legally and criminally threaten the Russians in order to demand a response. He first acted against Russia with accusations criminally, and then said to the Russian government, please respond to this. You're welcome to come and respond to the allegations. Mr. Khan should have said to the Russian government, you're being accused by Ukraine's Zelensky of crimes against humanity. I'm going there, to see the evidence that they claim they have, and I would like to hear from you before I make a decision on whether the Ukrainian government's lying or not. But that's not how Mr. Khan approached it. It's unfortunate because in the law, a prosecutor picks who he wants to believe and doesn't look at the other side's evidence. This is typical thinking of a prosecutor. Okay. In our case, Canada's got no evidence, Mr. Kahn. All our evidence is against them. So, just as a precautionary, not so much out of disrespect for the prosecutor of the ICC, but more to ensure that our case goes right to the top, we need it reviewed by the Chief Justice of the ICC. Okay? And then the Chief Justice can send a recommendation to Mr. Khan. I'm scared if it goes to Mr. Khan, it may disappear. Okay? And because of what I've seen, this prosecutor's actions, like, he's absolutely right about the Palestinians. I mean, the prosecutor Khan, absolutely a warrant for the arrest of Netanyahu and the rest of them. But the problem here is Mr. Khan is going to learn from me, okay, that as far as Netanyahu, yes, and his chief of staff general, yes, that Mr. Khan has named in the warrant. But the problem is there's another angle to this. This is that the real people in Israel's military who ordered the extermination, Mr. Khan, not genocide, extermination was the order to exterminate all of the Palestinian people. This was the actual order. Mr. Khan is mistaken there and he needs to update that. Further, I wish to state that Benjamin Netanyahu's war crimes against the Palestinians of genocide, Mr. Khan, we're going to improve upon that. And if the court is willing to see all my evidence against the ones here supporting him and their government, okay, there's going to be a change to Nazi genocide by Mr. Khan, okay? Because clear cut, there's, as I said before, regarding the Palestinians, I've monitored all of the complaints from people from the UN in Gaza to people in Israel, citizens of Israel that have leaked material, to statements by Palestinian children of the murders of their parents. And what I found here is evidence proving that the personnel, the hierarchy of Israel's military has used cloned Hitler policy that Hitler used against the Jewish people in the death camps, as well as Nazi Germany from 1933 to 40. I'm seeing a combination of Nuremberg policies against the Palestinian people by Netanyahu's government and their military, along with Hitler's restrictions of suppression as well. That's what we're seeing. And I have enough evidence to prove that, to change the prosecutor's narrative on the nature behind the destruction of the Palestinian people. And that nature is definitely cloned Nazi SS, or whatever you want to call it. This needs to be understood. So I defend the Palestinians. I've risked my life to defend the Palestinians in front of the Russian embassy, not against the Russians, but going down there protesting with my trailer where, 90% of my signs were encouraging Russian President Vladimir Putin to recognize that the attack against the Palestinians, the political motivation behind that attack, the policies used for that attack are indeed cloned Nazi SS policies used against my people, the Jewish race, in Auschwitz, Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Sachsenhausen, and all the other ones. That the SS policies have indeed been used. I'll give you an example, just one of many as proof, a statement of proof. In one piece of evidence, okay, regarding the IDF in Gaza, and this is evidence that's been marked as evidence, okay? The IDF went into a building, okay? They arrested around 10 to 20 male Israeli men. And within those men was what I consider to be an adolescent child, okay? One or two of those The IDF forced them outside onto the street from this building. They made them strip all of their clothes off naked, okay? And then they assassinated them. They killed them, okay, with guns. Now, what's important, where does that piece of evidence fit into what I've said? If we look, and I direct this to Prosecutor Khan and the Chief Justice, if we look at the Holocaust, in particular, one death camp in particular called Sobibor, okay? In that case, we've heard of the movies with Alan Arkin, a Jew, and Rutger Hauer, who played a role as the Russian in Sobibor. We also have the Russian people recently making a movie called Sobibor in Russian. It was completely written and directed by the Russians. This movie also has been aired, okay, more recently. Now, according to the record of what was transpiring in Sobibor against the Jewish people by the SS were that the Jewish people would get off the train would come, they would get off the train, some would be selected to work in Sobibor, and then the rest would be marched, as it were, to the showers, as they call them. So they were marched down this path with flowers on each side, standing high, and wired fences behind them, and they're marched down this long path of vines and greens to a door, okay? They were taken through that door, double set of doors at the end, to line up at what the Nazi SS called the showers, okay? And they made the Jewish women and children strip naked and sent them into the gas chambers, okay? Also, in other cases of death camps of Nazi Germany, SS guards in death camps would make Jewish people strip down to their nakedness and shoot them in the head. This is evidence of what happened to those Palestinians that were dragged out of an apartment building, all male, forced to strip of their clothes. Why did the Nazis strip Jews of their clothes when they were alive? Because they're going to kill them all and they have to go into pits. Like if you look at some of the pits in the death camps that were found when the war ended by the Russian Red Army and the Allies, you can see that all the bodies in those pits, most of them are naked. They have no clothes on. None. Okay? So this exacting style of instant murder was used against 10 or 20 Palestinian males, forced out of a building, forced to strip their clothes, and they were executed afterward. That's just one piece of evidence to nail Mr. Netanyahu, not simply as a Jewish monster that committed genocide, but to get, because I want the Nazi word added, okay? And I'm striving for that, based on my material evidence, okay, that the accusation by Mr. Khan and the ICC be changed to Nazi extermination by Netanyahu, okay, supported by the American government and the UK. Because the American White House and 10 Downing Street in London were sending arms by military cargo jets to Israel. And those arms were being used for the extermination of the Palestinians. That's the bottom line. Now, the question is, who's behind it? I just explained it to you. In my investigations of these balts who tried to gas me, who have been following my wife and I through the police, okay, these balts are sitting in offices in the Ottawa Police Department here, the RCMP, hiding themselves. Well, they have their human recruits, as I refer to them, who are not pale white and tall balds, who actually have tans. These ones here can't seem to tan in the summertime. And I have researched this, ICC, okay? And they have now recruited enough so-called, human-looking police officers with hair who don't reflect Nazi skinheads, who have been tracking and targeting my wife and I for these neo-Nazi colonial balds, who are now high enough in rank that they're running operations at the police departments with desk jobs and sending out their what I refer to as the human to track my wife and I instead. Back in 2012, 13, the balds were doing it themselves. Okay, coming at my wife and I, threatening us themselves. Okay. Now we hardly ever see them. Now it's all of their forced recruits who are trained in Nazi SS policy to murder my wife and I, who are tracking and targeting us now throughout this city. These are the people behind it. Okay? I have all this. I have enough circumstantial evidence for Khan to prosecute NATO as well. Okay? The Russians have stated that the policies being used against them by Ukraine and NATO are Nazi policies. I don't know how many times Sergei Lavrov said this. The only race of people that know a Nazi and Nazi policy on the spot, there's only two races of people that would know instantly: Jews and the Russians. And also there's a third party, Simon Wiesenthal and myself, researchers of Nazism. We will know on the spot. You could line up 10 men, Mr. Khan, in front of me, and I'll tell you just by looking which ones could be Nazis. Okay? And the psychological games are the same. These I also did a psychological profiling of the SS in their direct relationship with Jews in death camps and concentration camps and so on. Okay, and I was able to get a psychological profile as well, and the psychological profile of Nazi security in these Dachau, as well as Auschwitz-Birkenau. The psychological profile exactly match the psychological profile of the police here and their Nazi bald chiefs who are targeting my wife and I. It's called the "we're going to fear you" psychological profile of these people. And they're following the same acts of terrorism and psychological fear-mongering against my wife and I that they used against my people, the Jewish race. It's exactly the same. Proof is in the pudding. Anyway, I gotta go. Shalom, God bless. And I'm not going to be intimidated. My wife and I do expect to be granted asylum. We also expect the ICC to raise Article 17 in our favor against Canada. We expect the ICC also to consider Article 24 and 25 of the CRH, I think it is. Article 24, 25, Vatican, Vatican Embassy here and the ICC indicate that victims of organized crime are to be protected. We request an application be applied for us for that protection, witness protection, okay? From Canada's police and government. Do you understand? God bless.